It's gonna be loud. Um, I think I want to talk about this. That ultimately I am white. Wow. I think that this is just a white person talking about stuff, which means anything I'm saying is limited, and I'm sure there have already been many books by black and brown people, um, whatever creators there have been, educators, what fucking have you. So this is just the least type of stuffing, and I'm not even looking on. I don't read books very much, so I don't even know. um, so I don't have enough knowledge to even have this as an educated point of view or anything. If you wanted to know these things like me, I could have already learned all of this from um black authors, what have you. I am just pointing it out from my own perspective, just as a person. Um, the white people are just as a general, that white people do not have a sense of humanity. This has happened. Um, it's always been this way, as far as we know. I've literally not eaten at all today, so that's weird. Whiteness has always been, because of the British colonialism, that for even so we already know history that it was mostly conquest for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of years. It would be the Chinese, the Spanish, the British, the French a little bit too. Ultimately, um, the conquest only started after fucking the British started figuring out about goddamn ships and all that. And ultimately, everything since that time has been all about conquest and control. It is, I'm not to say that it's always white people been like that. I'm just referring to our ancestry from the British Empire. The British Empire um, has had where people go to, new lands that already existed with indigenous people who already lived there. That it's the creation of control and manipulation of the natural systems there. I already said that ultimately it's kind of good and kind of bad. I don't know that we would have had airplanes as early as they did, because of the way that everything was all about control and expansion, is how we got into capitalism in the first place. And I don't think any of these indigenous cities and lands would ever have capitalism to begin with. Um, the form of control and manipulating things is the only thing that we know about this is for disdain of humans. for you only have a very select amount of humans that they give a shit about. It's like the direct family and people, and they, you can't even say that white people like only support white people. They don't necessarily they don't like go easier. I guess they do. Yeah, they do, cuz they fucking started paying fucking a million to a fucking racist white lady. Yeah, they only support the white people. But they don't even, it's like only to a certain degree of what they appreciate of whiteness. So it's, of course, I already said that hierarchies, pyramid schemes are within everything. So you got a pyramid scheme within a pyramid scheme within a pyramid scheme. And so you're still going to have that with whiteness, especially in America, that you're going to be like, well, we still only like whiteness, but there will be people at the lowest of our pyramid scheme. So certain things like um, disabled people who are white are still not going to be as um, treated well because they're white. They'll just get less abuse than they would if they were black or brown. Um, so white people don't at this point, for the whiteness, they basically have, they limit the amount of abuse they will do for the lightness of their skin for some reason. And the reason is probably all based on capitalism that has been the only culture that whiteness has. You don't remember all of those types of things. I mean, we've always had, if we're talking about the British, we're talking about Victorian, and that's only about the wealth and the poor. It was at a certain time that you would have um, noblesse, oblige, whatever. The nobles have the obligation to at least make it survivable for the poor, the peasants, because the peasants are the one who raise the fucking food. Um, Even then, because of the way with the colonialism that everything gets forgotten at a certain point because it's still within the whole capitalism and within conquest. If you do this enough of times, they will not keep all of those things, and then it becomes the only thing that matters, which is wealth and greed. So I had seen this movie. You see this a lot on movies, TVs, whatever. You always have um a a black characters in an American movie with, it's still about white people. You will still get the black Americans who will do the most humane things that you wouldn't expect from white people, and that is, it's a mix of, they like to see it but they don't really like to appreciate that in real life. They only like that as like, it's more of a mammy than it is of anything. Like some of it, it's performative versus, I do know that black Americans and other people of the black brown people will be more humane than you would of a white people, because white people are only ones who have the culture of capitalism and conquest, that it almost, we as a entire race, which is, I know it's a sham, that ultimately we don't give a shit about other human beings because it doesn't address our own personal um path and journey and whatever they're trying to get to. So the most of the time of white culture, it is to grow your greed and wealth, and it applies to the entire race, because ultimately even poor people will assume that they can get rich at some point because that's the only culture they know of. Um so for us as white people, there's not a white person who has loved humanity unless they straight up and like ignored and tried to unlearn from the things that you are raised as a white person. um to give a shit about humans is to understand that the way that we're expecting is not supposed to be the way we have for the good of the colony, for the good of humanity. You have to release from capitalism and release from conquest and all of that type of shit. And for the hope of the American dream is just the hate of others, ultimately. Because if we gave a shit about other human people, we would create it to be more of a community. And we would be like, we don't need all of these suburbia. Suburbia is just a subsect of capitalism as is, and it's another form of you want to have your own unit for the nuclear family. You want to have yours. It's your possessions. It's your little thing. So you want your own your individual kit instead of, oh, well, I could actually have all of this stuff. I could have a whole community. People could share all of these types of things. That's not something for white culture. That doesn't exist. You can say, well, I go to parties. Okay, so is that mostly your family? That's another form of possession, again, that I'm telling you. That's the nuclear family. That's your cousins. That's your whatever. But were they your friends? Were they people you were neighbors? Sometimes I did have neighbors would have it for that. Sometimes I used to have neighbors and all that, but I was fucking Mormon, so half of that was Mormons anyway, so I don't even know. Um Ultimately, because the only culture they have is capitalism, they're never going to appreciate traditions except for the belief of individual possessions and the belief of individual gain and growth. And that's why you have all these rich people go for rich people, poor people for poor people. And they maintain the same um, social relations just in general, and the communities that they have. That's just like white people still assume that at some point they would eventually have enough conquest that they would still be in the rich people, which isn't even like it's not possible. It's not possible. But still, for the general race, that white people will still believe that they will be rich enough that they will be a very wealthy person. They still believe in that, even though you can't consider of that. And they don't hold that as, oh, I can share more for my community. White people do not do this. White people will not start paying for charities, create charities, except for tax tax breaks, honestly. So if you ever have um and even that, anyway, ultimately for the white culture is to conquest still, because we have entirely forgotten actual cultures that we originated from, which is why we always had, especially in America, when we had the literal slavery and the other subsect of slavery, that for when we had physical, the theft of humans and enslaving people, um they isolated those individuals anyway. They made it entirely not people. They would never treat them as actual human beings because it's a form of their own control and wealth, and they would not consider as human beings. They created the option, they created the force of isolation and removal of family, because that's something that white people have always held, which is it's that not only we only give a shit for our own literal family, like immediate family, which means that's the only level of humane that we have, that we will of course remove that from anyone else. That's why you had the natives always had to be, they were tortured for many different tribes, and that's why they also isolated all of those people, that they don't view them as their direct family. That is what they give a shit about, that everything else is to be controlled. And that's why everything has been bad there, and that's why white people still have that, because it's still, if you assume that there is first of all, it's the way you're raised, then it's you, if you assume that there's trauma from enslaved people and their descendants still having the same version of trauma, of course it would make sense that white people who had people who had controlled people and slave owners type of things, that would affect how the whole thing um, changes how we raise kids anyway. Even if it's not direct trauma of PTSD, the beliefs are still raised down all the way through all of this. So for the Black Americans, they have the PTSD from past then coming all the way down. For white people, it's from the beliefs and uh, the hatred has come down all the way down here, and you still have to unlearn all of those things, because it's been, like wealth, has been handed down from their descendants. Um, so whiteness has always been something. It's not a real culture. It's just the control and the conquest that has been maintaining through the same descendants and all of that. And it's not even like, because they let go of any of culture that you might have had, like the Germans have a lot of culture. They like to do a lot of certain things. They have a lot of festivals. White Americans do not have inherent festivals, if not for something from the weird Christianity or Catholicism that they like. That's like a weird holiday based on a religion. That's the only thing they hold. There's nothing for, oh, this is just something for something fun or for the community. Like, I know there's still toxic, there's racist issues from, Europe, because they're also subsect of fucking conquest anyway. I don't know, they still had certain festivals that you ain't gonna get here in white America. So, yeah, the ultimately, of course, it does also have, the only thing they teach their kids is mostly of the belief system that they maintain for their children. That's why we don't want to support um racist white people. Like, you assume that the white woman marries a white man and she's like, I can do whatever I want to, but you still marry the racist piece of shit, and that is raised to your new kids. So even if the woman is the one who is progressive, which is subjective anyway, you still have some other form there that will raise them, and you're within a whole pyramid scheme that you're a subjugate anyway. So that person has the bigger voice than you would, because your entire society will not support the woman anyway. It's all for the male, which means not only you have no control, over how your kids are raised. It's the entire society you continue for all of that. If white women were like, well, I don't need it. Now's the time you don't want to fucking marry shit, because at this point, yeah, that's still, if you breed with someone who's as racist as you're expecting, you're going to get that in your children. If the beliefs are still in instilled, and you'll still get that even if you try and teach them all of those, the society will not support you as a white person who is progressive or anti-racist, if you can assume you get to that point. Your society will not support that because you have breeded a racist piece of shit. So you will still have, your children will still know that it is something that is valuable in your society because you've literally married that person. Um it's all uh the best you can do as a white person is to straight up spend more time in community. If you listen to other human beings, whatever skin they have, whatever body they have, if you listen to other human beings, you will learn other forms of traditions that you would may never hear. Maybe you would want to keep a tradition that they ever tell you. You can connect with people and see what other people are experiencing other than the belief system you've been raised, and you can learn for other forms of belief system, and you can see how other people raise their children. If you do anything with, school, whatever, the more you connect with community with whatever levels you can, the better. And you can always start with simple stuff. Everyone, because of suburbia, everything is close, as in your neighbors. You can connect with your neighbors and give a shit about other human beings, and the more you do that, you can let go of the belief system that has instilled on whiteness in general. That if you connect with, oh, guess what? People have different lives, different experiences. There's not a single way to live and experience. Everything can be something more more expensive than you expect. You can let go of those things that will not give you anything except for absolute trauma, because this is survival mode. You're only going to believe in things for you to live, thrive, and have wealth. You will not give a shit about other human beings. You will not be a healthy human being because we as humans are extremely social. You cannot live on your own. If you can, you're creating other things. Like, you can't even, everyone needs to talk to other human being. If you're only talking to other white people, guess what? You're only going to get that. You're only going to get the belief system that has created your entire society now. Us as white people, right now, you want to find what other people have. You want to go to the library. You want to connect to your neighbors. You want to see how people are other than your workplace. You want to connect with human beings everywhere so that you can get used to giving a shit about humans and not relying on your survival mode anymore. So, yeah, it's the way you were raised that you have to let go of, which is that there is no tradition except for conquest, and that's not something that you want to keep doing. I'm sure there's always, which means I need to fucking read. I know that there's always very like always black authors who have like doctorates type of fucking stuff, that you could get all this stuff with actually scientific evidence, evidential responses, and all of this type of stuff. I'm just making nobody fuck. I guess it's the whole. I mean, if you wanted to Google it, you could. I'm just saying what I know in my life right now, that I am expending more time in community, which I do need to more. Not just protests, but also the entire community. It's not a one time thing for you to protest. I want you to go spend more time with community as is. Let go of the belief that has instilled you as a white person that it's not something that will give you anything except for sadness and depression and isolation. And it's horrible. And you should probably let go of it. Capitalism does nothing for you. It still will not believe you as valuable. Your your death will um not be addressed. They won't give a shit. Capitalism doesn't give a shit if you die. So, yeah, give a shit about humans for the good of the colony. Do more for what you can and give a shit about other human beings. Learn about how other people experience this and it will do much better for you. Not even to even figure out about, you know, to the best you can learn to fight any racism is to just give a shit about human beings. The more you hear about other people, the more love you can expand to have more other humans in your life. And then you're like, well, I wouldn't want this happen to me because look at this. This is a lovely human being. Look at all the things that's going on with their stuff. I don't want to have pain on somebody else anymore because that's the thing that you've been raised as a white person to not give a shit about people. It's the only thing that's been continued within all of the white descendants. White isn't even a real. It's there's actually cultures of being pale and other Europe and anything, but you don't get it in America. The only thing they ever did was try to have government control, all of that type of thing that they never kept with the indigenous and especially the enslaved people they stole. So to imagine that you don't have the same system belief from early on is that you don't even want to address the isolation of your own single faceted culture, because that's the only thing you know and that's the only thing you ever will value because you have no consider of others. And it could be any other tradition you could create. All you know is religion and control. It's disgusting. So best you can do is fucking learn more about other human beings, give a shit about other human beings, learn what we can do for the good of the colony. And that's not just bees don't do that. They don't give a shit about racism. They just have four people that they have there. And it's the same whole system that goes around all of them. So you might not be living in Germany, you might be living in South Africa. If you have the same system belief, and if we're like bees, other systems can be almost similar to what other countries may have. So, for the good of the colony, let go of your expectations and the control and all of that. That's just survival mode that you don't even fucking need. So, that's that. Bye.